Life here in Uzuaku village did not wait. It dragged people along with it. Women stepped out early, wrappers tied tight around their waists, hose resting across their shoulders. Their footsteps were steady, their faces already set for the long hours ahead. Some carried babies on their backs, the children still half asleep, their tiny heads rolling gently with each step. The men moved in a different direction, toward the river. Nets hung over their shoulders, still damp from yesterday. Their voices were low this morning. Maybe because the catch had been poor. Maybe because hope in Uzuaku was not something you wasted loudly. Further away, younger men disappeared into the bush, cutlasses in hand. Hunting was not bravery, it was survival. Every rustle in the leaves meant one thing: opportunity or danger. And then there were the children, barefoot, sleep still clinging to their eyes, carrying containers bigger than their strength. They walked a narrow path through the bush, heading toward a distant stream. Some yawned, some dragged their feet, but none of them complained, because complaining did not bring water. And in Uzuaku, water came before everything, even before education. Because there was no school in the village. Those who dared to learn walked miles to another community, under the burning sun, under heavy rain, sometimes returning in the dark, their small bodies trembling with exhaustion. Uzuaku was not just poor, it was invisible, forgotten by a country that had moved on without looking back. But even in a place like that, something unusual can grow, something that refuses to stay buried. His name was George West, and from a young age, people knew there was something different about him. Not just in the way he looked, though he carried himself with a quiet confidence. No, it was in his eyes, sharp, curious, restless, always searching for something beyond what he could see. George was one of the few children who made that long journey to school. Rain or sun, it didn't matter. His clothes would be soaked, his slippers would break, his stomach would growl, but he never stopped. At night, when the village had fallen asleep, George would sit outside his mother's hut with his small kerosene lamp. The flame flickered, weak, dancing with the wind, but his focus, it never wavered. He read like someone chasing something, like someone who knew time was not on his side. Inside the hut, his mother, Grace, would watch him. Her hands were always busy, sorting grains, folding wrappers, preparing for another day, but her eyes stayed on him. There was pride there, and fear, because she understood something George did not. Hope can be heavy, and when too many people place it on one person, it can crush them. One evening, she stepped outside and sat beside him. "George," she called softly. He looked up immediately. "Yes, Mama." She studied his face, then said, "A child who washes his hands clean will dine with kings." George smiled faintly. "I will make you proud, Mama." Grace nodded, but inside, something tightened. She wasn't afraid of him failing. She was afraid of what success might turn him into. The decision that changed everything came on a dry morning. The entire village gathered under the big udala tree. Even the children were quiet. The elders sat in front, the women stood behind, whispering. The youths waited, watching. At the center stood Elder Samuel. "My people," he began, "we have lived like this for too long." Silence. "Our children suffer just to drink water, just to learn. We have no school, no clinic, no future we can see." The air grew heavy. "We must send one of our own to go far, learn, and return." Murmurs spread. Who will go? And with what money? Then a voice rose. "George West!" Heads turned. Another voice, "Yes, George West." Then louder, "George, it must be George." George felt it, that sudden weight. He had not asked for this, but now every eye expected something from him. "If we choose him," Elder Samuel said, "then we must all sacrifice." And that changed everything, because now hope had a price. One by one, they came forward. Small amounts, painful amounts, but they gave, because hope, even when it hurts, is hard to ignore. Then Grace stepped forward. She removed a small gold earring, her husband's last gift. It caught the sunlight. "My son will not fail you." George looked at her, and in that moment he felt the weight of something far bigger than himself. The day he left, the entire village followed. Children cried, women prayed, men placed hands on his shoulders. "The river that forgets its source will one day dry up," Elder Samuel said. George nodded, but his eyes were already fixed ahead. The bus came, dust rose, and just like that, George West left Uzuaku behind. The first night abroad, he did not sleep. The silence was too much. No insects, no voices, no generators, just silence. Back home, silence meant danger. Here, it meant nothing. And somehow, that felt worse. Days passed. He struggled, not with intelligence, but with everything else. The language, the speed, the laughter he didn't understand. Here, he was invisible again, but this time, differently. Still, he didn't stop. He studied harder, pushed further, because here, being smart was not enough. And slowly, something began to change. When George finally returned to Nigeria, it was not with hesitation, it was with purpose. Lagos welcomed him with noise, with energy, with opportunity. Tall buildings stretched into the sky. Cars flooded the roads. The air carried a mixture of ambition and chaos. George fit into it perfectly. He did not rush to Uzuaku. There were meetings, investments, connections to solidify, deals to make. When he finally decided to visit the village, it was not as a son returning home, as a man arriving with plans. The convoy of cars entered Uzuaku like a storm. Dust rose. Children ran after them, shouting in excitement, "He has come! George has come!" Women abandoned their chores. Men stepped out from their compounds. The entire village gathered once again under the Odala tree. Grace pushed through the crowd. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. "My son." When she saw him, tears filled her eyes instantly. He looked different, sharper, cleaner, untouchable. She rushed forward and embraced him tightly. George hesitated, just for a second, but that second was loud. The meeting began. Elder Samuel, older now, weaker, but still commanding respect, spoke first. He said, "We have waited. Now tell us, what have you brought for your people?" George stepped forward, calm, confident, controlled. He said, "I have come with a vision. We will bring development to this village, roads, industries, jobs." Hope sparked instantly. Faces lit up. But then he continued, "And to do that, things must change." The smiles faded slightly. "The land must be reorganized. Ownership will be centralized under my company to ensure efficiency." Silence. Heavy. Confused. Dangerous. Daniel stepped forward slowly. He asked, "What are you saying, George?" George did not flinch. "I am saying that for progress to happen, control must be structured. Individual ownership is outdated." Murmurs turned into voices. Voices turned into anger. You want to take our land? This is our inheritance. It is not taking, said George firmly. It is development. Grace stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it cut through everything. George, these are your people. He looked at her, but his eyes carried something unfamiliar, distance. You don't understand the modern world, Mama. That was the moment everything broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. The boy they raised was gone. The change did not happen in one day. It came quietly, like harmattan dust, settling slowly until everything was covered. At first, the villagers argued. They resisted. Voices rose under the Udala tree, sharp and emotional. This land is our life. You cannot take what belongs to our fathers. But George West did not argue like one of them anymore. He spoke like a man used to being obeyed, used to being right, used to winning. If we remain like this, nothing will change, he said, his tone firm, almost impatient. You cannot keep holding on to old ways and expect a new future. Some believed him. Desperation has a way of bending people, especially when hope is attached to it. Others refused. Daniel stood his ground. Elder Samuel warned against haste. Grace said nothing. Then the machines came, huge, loud, unforgiving. Bulldozers tore through familiar paths. Trees that had stood for generations fell in minutes. Dust filled the air, thick and choking. Homes were marked. Some were moved. Others were demolished. Uzuaku began to change, but it did not feel like growth. It felt like loss. The unity that once held the village together started to crack. Neighbors argued. Friends avoided each other. Families whispered behind closed doors. Maybe this is progress, or maybe we have made a mistake. George watched it all from a distance, not physically, but emotionally. He stayed in a newly built structure on the edge of the village, modern, clean, separate. Separate, that word defined everything now. At night, he sat alone on a balcony that overlooked the land he was reshaping. Lights glowed softly around him. A glass of expensive drink rested in his hand. From afar, the village looked smaller than he remembered, less significant. He told himself it was necessary, that change always came with discomfort, that one day they would understand. But something inside him was restless, a quiet discomfort he could not name. He stopped visiting his mother, not intentionally, just gradually. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and each time he thought of going, something held him back. Guilt, or maybe pride. Grace did not come to him either. She remained in her small hut, living the same life she always had, but something had changed in her too. She no longer waited at the road. She no longer asked about him. When people mentioned his name, she simply nodded, nothing more. Elder Samuel's health began to fail. Age had already weakened him, but now something deeper seemed to weigh on him. Disappointment. One evening, Daniel visited him. The old man lay on a mat, his breathing slow. "Do you think we made a mistake?" Daniel asked quietly. Elder Samuel closed his eyes. "The child we sent out," he said slowly, "came back as a man we do not recognize." News reached George days later, but he did not go immediately. There were meetings, important decisions, deadlines. By the time he arrived, Elder Samuel was gone. The burial was heavy, not just with grief, but with silence. The villagers gathered, but this time the atmosphere was different. Cold, measured, distant. George stood among them, well-dressed, composed, but completely alone. Grace stood beside the grave. Her face was calm, too calm. She did not look at George, not once. As soil fell onto the coffin, a memory flashed in George's mind. Elder Samuel's voice, "The river that forgets its source will dry up." For the first time in years, Those words did not sound like advice. They sounded like judgment. That night, George could not stay inside. The walls of his modern house felt tight, uncomfortable. He stepped outside and began to walk. He walked without direction, past the farms, past the empty paths, until he reached the stream. It was still there, unchanged, flowing quietly under the moonlight. He stood at the edge, staring into the water, and suddenly, everything came back. The long walks as a child, the laughter, the hunger, the determination, his mother's voice, the sacrifices, the day the entire village called his name. His chest tightened, his breath became uneven. "What have I become?" he whispered. For years, he had chased success, built power, created influence. But standing there, none of it felt real. None of it felt enough. The truth hit him slowly, then all at once. He had not just changed, he had abandoned something sacred. George fell to his knees. The ground was cold, but he did not care. For the first time since he left Uzuaku, he cried, not quietly, not controlled, but deeply, like something inside him was breaking open. Redemption did not begin with words. It began with silence. The next morning, George did something no one expected. He called off all ongoing land seizures. At first, no one believed it. Rumors spread. Is it true? Or another plan? Then he took it further. He dissolved the centralized control system. Land ownership was returned, fully, without conditions. People were confused, suspicious, watching, waiting. George did not call a meeting. He did not make speeches. Instead, he started working, quietly, consistently. He funded the construction of his school, but this time it was not under his name. It belonged to the community. He installed a clean water system so children no longer had to walk miles before sunrise. He rebuilt homes that had been destroyed, not as compensation, but as responsibility. Still, the villagers did not celebrate, because forgiveness is not given to words, it is earned through time. Days turned into months, months turned into years. Slowly, something began to shift. Not loudly, not suddenly, but gently. People started greeting him again, not warmly, but not coldly either. Daniel was the first to speak to him properly. One evening, they stood near the farms. "You have changed," Daniel said. George nodded. "I had to." But the most important moment came quietly, as most important moments do. Grace was sitting outside her hut when George approached. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. He stopped a few steps away. For a moment, he said nothing, because there are some apologies that words cannot carry. "Mama?" he finally whispered. Grace did not respond immediately. She kept her gaze fixed ahead. Then she spoke. "A child who forgets his home," she said slowly, "must find his way back alone." George swallowed hard. "I lost my way." Then, slowly, Grace turned her head and looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as the powerful man he had become, but as the boy she raised. She saw something there, something broken, something honest. She lifted her hand and placed it gently on his head. It was not celebration. It was not pride. It was acceptance, careful, measured, but real. And in that moment, George understood something he had never fully grasped before. Success without roots is emptiness. Power without humility is destruction. And progress without people is nothing. And a man who learned, painfully, that greatness is not measured by how far you go, but how well you remember where you started. Thank you for watching this amazing story. If you are new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button now and become part of this storytelling family. Drop a comment telling us which country you are watching from.